My boss at the time said, "Oh, you should work in cybersecurity." I said, "That is the one job I am not qualified for." I remember my first week, knew nothing about cybersecurity, not a single acronym, absolutely nothing. It was funny because my first calls, I had to Google everything. I grew up with a lot of learning disabilities. The story that I told myself was, look, I'm not good at school. I was going to enlist in the Army. If I had a bingo card, cybersecurity would have been the last option I would have picked.
I'm really curious how you sort of changed that internally for yourself. Was there a moment where you realized, oh, that's actually not correct? Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Good,
Thank
how are
you
you?
so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on the Security Sitdown to talk about your career as a CISO.
And my life story.
Yeah,
All
and
together,
all
all
the
together,
things.
all
Yeah.
together.
It's always more interesting when we weave in the life story throughout the professional story,
I think one drives the other.
Yeah, it really does, right? So I love to kind of start these conversations by going back a little bit and just talking about what led you into your career now as the CISO of James Hardie and kind of what brought you to this point.
I think my career has been a random walk of just random jobs. So
I feel like I can relate to that.
I think probably stems back to my childhood, but my career, I started out thinking I was going to be a finance major.
Okay.
So I went to college, was a finance major, and I actually did inventory inspections and repossessions
Oh,
out of
wow.
college,
Interesting.
and did a wide variety of careers. Worked in finance for a while, quality. I was a sales leader for about 4 years. And then about 12 years ago, I started transitioning into IT. And one of my first CISO role was at Marmin.
Mhm.
And I remember the interview because my boss at the time said, "Oh, you should work in cybersecurity." I said, "That is the one job I am not qualified
Oh,
for." I
interesting.
think about 4 times during that interview, I said, "I am not qualified
You're
for
like,
this."
please do not move
No,
forward with
not at
this.
all. So I started in that role, and it was during COVID. So I
Okay.
had been consulting and got this role. I remember my first week, knew nothing about cybersecurity, not a single acronym, absolutely
Wow.
nothing.
That's super impressive because that's not that long ago.
And so that was about 6 years ago, 5
Okay.
years ago, and that first it was funny because my first calls, I had to Google everything. I didn't
Mhm.
know what EDR stood for or
Mhm.
any of these acronyms. I'm like, okay, I
There's
don't.
so many acronyms.
Yeah, so we ended up so that was a rough year, I will say. So it was a lot of Googling.
Okay.
Marmin is a fairly large business, has
Mhm.
140 different businesses, all with their own networks and security programs, which created a number of challenges
Mhm.
within that role. And so for me, really, it was rolling up my sleeve that year and really understanding how to use all these tools, what all the
Yeah.
acronyms meant, going out and getting my certifications. And it really was one of those many times I said, well, how hard can it really be?
We love
And
that.
I got into it and I thought, there's a lot more to this than I
Yeah.
thought there was.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting journey for me. I also managed infrastructure in that role and also another topic I knew nothing about. But I think that's pretty consistent with my career. I even going back to when I was in sales, I showed up for that interview and the manager said, "Well, have you ever led a sales team
Yeah.
before?" And I worked at the Gap.
Wow.
And they literally ran out of candidates. They made five other offers, and then I actually got like the sixth offer and they
Wow.
gave it to me out of default. I think it was like the pity offer and I took it and
I
did that
think
for
I don't
4
know.
years.
I think you got to give yourself a little bit more credit. I mean, you keep finding yourself in these opportunities where you're given this chance to kind of embark on a new challenge and you take it and run with it. I mean, that's pretty
I think
impressive.
I think and you and I have spoken about this a little bit. Going back to at an early age, I grew up with a lot of learning
Mhm.
disabilities. I didn't actually graduate. I graduated high school with a 2.2 grade point average. At that point, when I graduated, they actually forced rank people.
Oh, wow.
I was 323 out of 335, so almost
Hey,
dead last
that's
in my
impressive.
class. And I think the stories that we tell ourselves at that point, the story that I told myself was, "Look, I'm not good at school."
Yeah.
I was going to enlist in the Army. My dad, who had gone to Vietnam, was like,
Yep.
"No, you're
This is
not listing in
mm,
the Army." And so I ended up getting into the only school I could get into, which was Northern Michigan University,
Mhm.
on academic probation. And the reality is, the story that I was telling myself about not being good at school
Yeah.
wasn't the correct one. It was really, I just didn't know how to study, didn't know how to focus,
Yeah.
I didn't really know what worked for me.
Yeah.
And especially with my learning disabilities, it's really finding those environments that work for me.
Yeah.
And I think as organizations, we also tell ourselves these stories that may or may not be true, but that was a story that I told myself that just wasn't true. As I've gone through my career, it's really been important to me to say, what will make me successful at this role? I've
Mhm.
been in HR, been in finance, and all of them have their own unique challenges. It's just figuring out how to be successful in those roles, and really what are sort of those core competencies that make you successful at that role, and learning them. So
Yeah.
it's been a life adventure. It's funny, cybersecurity is not, if I had a bingo card, cybersecurity would have been the last
Yeah.
option I would have picked.
Yeah. So I love the notion of telling yourself a story that's not necessarily true or the right story. And I personally believe that wholeheartedly and talk about that a lot in my own personal life. We have to be really careful of the stories that we tell ourselves because they end up becoming true if we're not careful. So I'm really curious how you sort of changed that internally for yourself. When you was there a moment where you realized, "Oh, that's actually not correct," or did you have to make a concerted effort to start telling yourself a new story about how you learn?
I think it's doing the opposite of what you think
Yeah.
is, in terms of the story. So, for instance, I'm not good at studying.
Mhm.
Is that really true?
Mhm.
Is that really what the issue is, that I can't learn, that I'm unable to go to college? And really challenging that, and trying something different,
Yep.
right? So almost the opposite of what you think is the right thing
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
try a different approach.
Yeah.
And there's going to be times where it doesn't work out. I didn't know if I could lead a sales team. I have
Mhm.
no idea. I worked at the Gap as an
Mhm.
associate, selling clothes, folding clothes,
It's a pretty good
making
learning
minimum
ground.
wage. I mean, what qualifies me to lead a sales team?
Yeah.
On the surface, nothing. I mean, by the time I had left that job, I was leading a 40-person sales team. Revenue was growing 30% a year. Our sales growth was 30% a year. But going in, I knew nothing. And so I do think it's challenging yourself. It's being open to failure. I think
Mhm.
that's the other key piece is, how do you, is it's okay to not be ready for what, and sort of jump in and figure out along the way. I think that failure, especially early in my life, it makes it not, it's made it less of a big deal to
No.
fail. Hey, I'm gonna try this out.
Yep.
It might not work. I'm just gonna pivot and go do something else. I don't know what. Start a food truck, who knows? But
Yeah.
I'll just go, I'll figure it out along the way and just go with the flow.
I mean, Jeff, you have no idea how rare that is to be able to kind of jump fearlessly like that, or even with the fear, but doing it anyways when you realize, like, okay, maybe I don't know all the answers, or I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to learn and it's going to be an experience. And, let's kind of do it for the plot, so to speak, and see what happens. And when you kind of approach life from that perspective, it really is incredible where you can end up. And the fact that you just got into cyber 5 or 6 years ago and you're already a CISO now, I mean, it just goes to show how fruitful the end result of that kind of taking life by the horns like that can be. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I think for me, although then I went on to get 2 or 3 master's degrees, right? So that
Hmm.
was, I sort of went the overboard on the school piece, but I agree. I think a lot of times we look at these challenges, whether that's starting a business
Yep.
or taking on maybe a job that we know nothing about. I think we're probably more prepared for some of those things than we think.
Hmm.
So think about a CISO role. What's the CISO role? It's executive engagement. It's knowing a little bit about risk management, and
Hmm.
it's knowing about technical cybersecurity.
Yep.
I already had 2 of the 3 of those pieces going into that role.
Yeah.
I've been in front of executive teams before. I've been in front of boards before. I knew nothing about the technical side of cybersecurity,
Hmm.
but that's a lot of going to administrative training, going
Right.
and get my CISP. That's a lot of studying, finding people that are good mentors in that
Hmm.
space. Fortunately, I was part of Berkshire. There's a
Hmm.
lot of great CISOs within Berkshire
Yeah.
that were huge to me in terms of mentorship. And so really just finding the people that can help you, right?
Right.
Sort of your board of
Hmm.
directors, sort of the technical knowledge. I think we're in a time where you can find the answer pretty much to
Almost. Yeah.
anything.
Anything.
Yes.
Right.
So I think it's jumping in sometimes and then figuring out what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that that kind of approach to life and that mentality has also served you in sort of adopting new technology? I know you lean into AI a lot and you have sort of embraced this new era in technology. Do you think that there's a correlation there?
Yeah, I think, look, I curiosity is
Mhm.
my one of my cornerstones. And I do think, as we hop into AI and we've talked about Bob. So
Yeah,
for
we'll
those
talk
who
about
don't
Bob.
know who don't know who Bob is, so Bob is the AI agent I built to manage my inbox. He
Yeah.
reads all my emails, determines what I need to do. We'll make notes of it. We'll summarize my inbox on a daily basis, and Bob manages my life in terms of my inbox. I do think that curiosity and that ability to jump in leads into AI and new technologies.
Yeah.
And I think in cyber in particular, we're in this space where, and I talk to a lot of CISOs where they're in the space where we need more resources.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that that's always the right way to think about it. It's how do I do more with what I already have?
Right.
How do I start to automate some of the pieces that
Yep.
exist? How do I go out and leverage some of the resources I already have? I don't want a huge team. I want to
Mhm.
automate as much as
Yeah.
humanly possible. And then if I need more resources, I can go out and get them. But it's once again, we already have a lot of resources within cyber, but are we really maximizing the value we're getting out of them?
Yeah. I mean, obviously maximizing efficiency is a huge topic when we're talking about AI. Um, okay, Bob fascinates me, first of all. I want to know, I think when people hear this story and how much faith and trust you put into Bob, I think for me that would be the hard part to like trust that it's doing its job and I'm not double checking manually everything that it's reviewing. Like, did you feel like there was a learning curve or a process of like slowly relinquishing some of that control and fully trusting the machine to do its job?
Yeah, I think with anything, it's how do you take baby steps into it? How do you try one, a piece, and then is it really doing what it's supposed to?
Right.
And I think about Bob. Bob's in his fourth generation. First, Bob just did basic, just categorize
Mhm.
emails and would decide whether something needs to be replied to. Um, had some sentiment analysis, not a lot, probably too much.
Mhm.
And so now new Bob will tell me is someone angry, is someone
Wow.
that highlights a red, it will. And so I still have the guardrails on new Bob. It's just I have delegated a little bit more to him than I did in the past. So because my goal is really to work 40 hours but get 120 hours of work done a
Done.
week,
Right.
right? And so
Yep.
how do I use that as a multiplying force, not just for me but for my team?
Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible mentality to have. How did you learn how to build Bob?
A lot of tinkering on the weekend. So
Okay.
I do spend a lot of time with AI on the
Yeah.
weekend, whether that's coding, building, and back to my personality. I just love
Yeah.
tinkering with technology. And so it was a lot of just figuring out how does this work? If I
Yeah.
do this, what's going to happen? And so Bob was, I think, a weekend project. The first Bob was a weekend project. I'm like, I know I can make this work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was nose to the grindstone and just figuring it out.
What are some of your favorite AI platforms to tinker around and build on?
I used all of them. I have an open AI, I have
Okay.
Claude Code, I have Google. Um, so I tinker with a little bit of all of them,
Yeah.
depending on what. And for me, it's just also being in the security space. We get a lot of requests for people to
Right.
use AI tools,
Yes.
right? So whether that's editing a podcast like
Yep.
Descript, or
Yep.
whether that's image generation. So we spend a lot of time in getting requests from a cybersecurity perspective. And I think that's the other part of our duty as cybersecurity professionals is really understanding what's coming, not just at a high level, but how do these things really work? How do you
Mhm.
really secure them? Because without that knowledge, I don't know how we do our jobs and advise back to the business.
Right.
You should allow this AI, or you shouldn't allow this AI, or this is what the risk is to using this type of AI.
Yeah. And do you feel like all CISOs are as tech forward and like willing to maybe embrace this new technology, or some are more old school, kind of more set in their manual ways? Like how do you feel like you're kind of pushing the position forward a little bit as a whole?
I think it depends on the type of CISO. I think some CISOs are technical and are curious. And I think those are the types of CISOs that really dig in and
Yeah.
understand. I think some CISOs are probably more risk adverse
Hmm.
and probably a little bit more hesitant to adopting and really understanding the technology. And we are going to have to find that balance,
Yeah.
right? We can't become the CFNOs of the organization where
Hmm.
people don't want to come to us because we're just going to say no
CF
to them.
knows. I
I
love
think
that.
the other reality is it's hard to find a product now.
Yeah.
A year ago, you would easily find products without AI built into them.
Right.
It's hard to find a
No.
product
Yeah.
today without AI built into it.
Yep.
And users, without that sort of balance, users just find a way around you,
Yes.
right? There's technologies that I can set on my phone and set the phone next to a phone call and do a transcript,
Hmm.
right? And it'll take notes. And how do you protect that as a CISO? Because the person's working at home, they set their phone next to it. And so that enablement of that technology is really important because it has to be a partnership between us and the business. But yeah, I think there are some CISOs that are still
Yeah.
no. I think it's going to be incredibly hard to be a CISO and take that position because the executive teams, the boards
Right.
are looking for productivity
They're pushing
gains.
it forward. Yeah.
Yes, and pushing it forward.
And there's so much talk around AI in terms of like, okay, the big, huge workflows that are really impact the business across multiple business units, and then more like targeted use cases for AI. What have you seen work well in your organization? Have you seen like a larger, kind of broader AI use case that was successful, or typically it's the more like specific use cases that you see a quicker return on investment?
I think it's all three. So
Okay.
really when I think about AI strategy, we'll talk a little bit. I really see three levels. One is you sort of have a L1 level, which is just teaching you and I how to use AI
Mhm.
in our daily lives,
Mhm.
right? So whether that's using it to draft an email,
Right.
whether that's to drive general productivity, you probably get 15, 20, 25% productivity out of
Mhm.
that. Sort of that next level is where you actually have an AI agent start to do power use case where you and I could probably still build it. It's a
Mhm.
low code, no code solution. Maybe it does some tasks within a project, within a process.
Mhm.
It's starting to drive the process forward. And so, those are probably a little bit more effort, but
Mhm.
you get a higher return on those. And then you sort of have these L3 use cases, which are really, hey, I want to build this giant predictive model
Right.
that's going to drive manufacturing or whatever the other process is. And those are really long-term investments. I
Mhm.
don't think the world has seen a lot of gains out of those
Yeah.
really L3 use cases. I think if you went to most organizations, you would see we are seeing general productivity,
Mhm.
maybe too much sometimes, where you see people using AI in
For every
situations they
little
shouldn't
thing.
use
Yeah.
AI. Um, you're starting to see those power use cases, but really the big L3, those high level, really sophisticated use cases, I still think we're trying to figure out. I think you see a lot of money going into those large use
Yes.
cases,
For sure.
but I don't know that you're necessarily seeing the returns come
Yep.
out of from an organizational standpoint. But the
Yep.
L1 and the L2 use cases, getting general users to use it and also enabling sort of your power users to be able to
Mhm.
build more sophisticated applications and start to deploy more agents. I think there's a lot of upside, and those are tend to be easier lifts for most
Yeah.
organizations.
I would agree with that finding. So I talk to a lot of CISOs in my profession
I'm
and
sorry.
it and in this podcast. No, I generally like really selling to
I feel like
CISOs and
other
talking to
professions are
CISOs.
probably more exciting to talk to
No,
than
I
CISOs.
do. I find them as in general to be very a little quirky sometimes for sure, but really
I
intriguing
think us and accountants,
and
like I imagine like accounting and
yeah,
cybersecurity conferences are
just like
very
have a
much,
rager.
yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot
Not so much.
happening. I
Yeah.
feel like it's, yeah.
But it's really interesting to kind of see which are more so willing to kind of continue to push forward the the technology and the platforms and the AI, and which are like holding on a little bit more to like the old way of doing things. So I'm really curious of all of the technology that you have adopted on your team and that you've implemented, being one of these tech forward CISOs, are there any that have kind of been top of the list? You don't even have to name VISO, even though I'm sure it's up there, but which ones have made an impact for your team?
I do think, and I won't give you a shameless plug, but BISO is one of them,
Okay.
right? So obviously, one of the big challenges we had around third party risk is when I came in, we used to send out these surveys, 6 weeks
Mhm.
turnaround time, and really the enablement of AI, we can turn one around in 10 minutes now, right? And
Yeah,
so those
it's
are the
crazy.
types of platforms. Back to my earlier comments in the security space, you have to be able to find ways to automate your team.
Yes.
And it's not just because maybe we're not going to get additional headcount, or it's
Mhm.
the speed of the attacks. It's the
Right.
speed of the external environment. Is
Yeah.
you have threat actors leveraging AI, so how do you protect against that when you have a process that takes 4 or 5
Yep.
weeks, when literally it takes them seconds or minutes to attack? So you think
Mhm.
about security operations, and we've been using AI for years, right? Whether that's within your SIEM product, within your EDR product, all of those have been AI driven, right? I
Mhm.
think AI is bleeding into these other areas, which is like third party risk. I think even security architecture,
Mhm.
but you have to be able to automate and be able to leverage AI, because that is what your adversary is
Mhm. It's
leveraging to
using.
attacking you.
Right.
So you have no choice but to adopt these things.
Yep.
So it started with EDR,
Mhm.
right? So how do you detect attacks on a machine? It used to be the hashes, and then we started looking at behavioral. These five things happen, and that is a pattern of an attacker on this machine. And so
Mhm.
that's what really started sort of this automation within the security space, but it's continuing to expand out. And I think it's only going to continue. Whereas your level one SOC analyst isn't going to be a person anymore.
Right.
It's going to be an AI,
Yeah.
and it's not just because of efficiency. It's because that response time
Yeah.
has to be as fast as the attack, which is also being driven by AI.
Yeah. Beautiful plug. Thanks so much. I'll give you your payment after
There you
after the
go. That's
show.
perfect.
But no, I love that. And you bring up such a good point that the attackers are using this technology and they're continuing to use, new ways to access our environments. So how has that sort of changed the way that you're protecting your organization, besides obviously adopting new technology, but how are you thinking about potential breaches differently as AI is running
I'm
rampant?
gonna give a controversial view on
I
this.
love it.
So I think security awareness training has is probably not as useful as it once was.
Mhm.
I think these attacks are becoming so sophisticated.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I can spearfish thousands of people at once. I
Mhm.
can ingest your LinkedIn profile using
Mhm.
AI, and I could create a customized email.
Yeah.
And after 25 years of security awareness security awareness training, people still click
Oh, they
on the
still
link.
click, I know.
So we could do monthly,
Yep.
put people through hour by hour training. I think the attacks are becoming so sophisticated,
Yeah.
you can't out train your users.
That's a
And
real
so
that
what
is a
is
very
so
interesting
what
take.
does that mean? So you have to assume that your users are going to make the worst possible decision.
Yeah,
Uh,
humans being
humans,
humans. Yeah.
yes. And you're not going to be able to train them out of those behaviors. So part of this is network design.
Okay.
So how do I get rid of passwords? Right? So
Oh.
passwordless, right? And so my team knows it's a huge piece that I continue to drive is I don't want to use a password
Okay.
anymore. I want it to be, is it my device?
Okay.
And does it have the right certificates to get into this? It doesn't matter whether the password's right,
Interesting.
MFA,
Yeah.
it has to be my device.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's not my device, I don't care. It's not coming into the network. So how do you start to architect
Okay.
and
Mhm.
design? So when I log in with a PIN. I don't even know what
Mhm.
my password is
Mhm.
anymore. If
Yep.
I had to go use it the other day and I realized haven't known what it is for 2 months.
Mhm.
And so if a user doesn't know their password, they can't be fished out of a password,
Right.
right? And so modern network design, how do we get passwordless and eliminate passwords? No one wants to MFA 6 times a day.
No.
And so I don't MFA, use my little authenticator app. hardly ever anymore, right? And so those are the design concepts that you really have to assume the worst case scenario.
Mhm.
Your users are going to make bad decisions. They're going to click on it. They're going to plug the
Yeah.
USB stick in, whatever that scenario is. And then how do you design for that scenario in a way that the user still has a great experience?
Mhm.
Users love the fact that they
Yeah,
can
there's no
log in
passwords.
with a PIN or
Yeah.
biometrics,
Yep.
right? And that they don't have to now put a matching code and the password in 4 more times throughout the
Mhm.
day. And so once again, how are we designing a good user experience, assuming they're going to make some questionable life decisions? And so that's the other piece is really thinking about the proactive side of security, which is the architectural side.
I love that. So zero trust internally as well.
Yeah, and it's zero trust, and
But
that's
we'll
the
say it nicer than that.
I think the challenge that I have with zero trust is really a set of capabilities,
Mm,
and you can pick. It's really, depending on what model you're looking at, it's 40 or 50 different capabilities. You can pick and choose which ones,
mm.
right? Whether you're securing identity, the device, the network design. I think once again, it's a set of capabilities and you have to pick which ones are really right for your organization. I think vendors love to sell that, hey, just buy our product and you
Mhm.
have zero
You're
trust.
protected, yeah.
And I think that that is a risky
Yep.
value proposition.
Blanket
I think there's
statement.
a lot of truth and there's a lot of great vendors that sell a lot of great products in that
Mhm.
space. I don't think one solves. There's not a silver bullet
Yeah.
within that space.
Well, I've never said that to sell a product before, so I'm marked safe
There you go.
from that pitch. Okay, I love asking CISOs this question. Is there any specific breach throughout your career that you remember as like the one where you got the call and it was all hands on deck and there was a mini freak out moment?
Yeah, I think in my prior life, we had a lot of small companies and there were always problems,
Mhm.
right? And I can't talk about specifics, obviously,
Mhm.
but someone would click on something, it would lead to a ransomware
Is it
event.
usually a click that's starting
It's
it?
so it's interesting. Around 80% of breaches are identity based. So usually it's a click. A lot of times
This is
it's
terrifying.
it's the giving up of a password.
Yeah.
Hopefully they have multi-factor, but users will also give that up. So what happens is I get you to click on the link and then I get you to give me the code because you still think that you're in a session, right? With the real service and I'm just nearing the service and then I'm capturing that and now I have access into
It
your network.
always, like, blows my mind that that actually works or that people would fall for that, but I know inherently that they have gotten so sophisticated now that I could potentially fall
You're
for it
tired.
as a
You're
human.
tired. You're
Yeah,
not paying attention. It's 6 o'clock at night
yeah,
and you've had a long day. You've gone through 150 emails
yeah.
and you click on a link and you just think it's legitimate. Now, there are some I think, how did the person actually go through that? But on the flip side, it looks legit. It looks exactly like the Microsoft email you were
Right,
expecting.
right.
You happen to be expecting a link from Microsoft.
Mhm.
You click on it, they're mirroring exactly what the login screen will look like.
Yeah.
You put in your password, you put in your MFA, you actually get to the right screen, and you don't know that there's really now a session open somewhere else that they have access now into your network. And so I think that's sort of the misnomer that people have is I think they don't believe the frequency of attacks, which
Yeah.
I think is the problem because I can tell you that especially given the second half of this year, it's been a rough year for security incidents. I look at some of our external vendors, or just reading the news like Bleeping Computer, and there's been some really high, you
Yeah.
uh, very public attacks,
Yeah.
right, that have happened. And I think, no matter how sophisticated your security, everyone is always under attack.
Yeah.
And we all know this. We're all one click away
Mhm.
from a problem. But yeah, it is interesting. The whole how to get into a network and is fascinating to me. But yeah, it's I've had a number of those calls where we've gotten into ransomware incidents, and it's daunting, right? Because you're in a high stress situation
Mhm.
generally. You have maybe business executives that want everything to be working now. And you're really triaging that. Typically, that's where my A-type personality comes out in those situations.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm running this, I'm in charge.
Love that.
And
Take over.
And you
Yeah.
can judge me afterwards whether
Yeah.
these are all
Let's
good
get through this
decisions or not.
first.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, those typically are high stress situations. I always say, but here's the thing. If you have good immutable backups, meaning you can recover from a backup, yes, it's a painful recovery process, but you know you're going to get back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't have backups, if the threat actor was able to delete those, it is a bad life journey for you,
Yeah.
right? Because now you have the reality of, do I pay? But because if you don't, you have no data or systems. So you're going to make probably the life decision to pay. But this is where it gets worse is a lot of those systems aren't coming back up ever again.
Right.
So if you have large encrypted databases, they'll be non-recoverable, meaning whatever was in them is gone. You have large ERPs or anything that is, once again, large encrypted, there's a chance it's not coming back, even if you pay and get the code. And so it's not just the data that you're going to lose. You're going to lose your accounting configuration to your ERP configuration. And so one of the things that I really try to enforce anytime I'm speaking about this is you have to have immutable backups. That is your final.
Okay.
That's your final.
Yeah.
That's like the final line that if you have backups,
If everything else fails.
if everything else fails, yes, you'll have to get systems back up. You have to do the forensics. You have to go through and make sure there's no back doors, make sure those systems are patched before bringing them online. That's a tedious job, but you have to have immutable backups. It's the number one thing that, like, it's the line in the sand, because anything else makes life worse. Yeah.
I read somewhere recently that up to 40% of breaches nowadays are coming in through third-party vendors. Do you feel like that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think the broader risk. So it depends if there's API connectivity, right? So either they have access into really with third parties, you have a couple problems. So anywhere where there's connectivity, meaning that vendor gets breached, and that breach somehow can lead back into your network. So either they could be just a contractor. So Bob, who's doing programming for you,
Bob, not
the good Bob. Gets breached, their credentials. So you look at a lot of larger breaches. A lot of times it's third-party contractor, and it's not even an API. Sometimes in that case, it's just they were working off their laptop. Maybe their laptop didn't have the right type of security. Back to how are they designing because now you're dependent on them, that third party having good security hygiene. And so a lot of those breaches come in either through API or just credential breach. I think the other equally risky piece is where you have a third party, and maybe it's not even software, where you're heavily dependent on that service to continue to run your business. And so, for instance, you have one logistics provider, you can't ship anything if that logistics provider goes down. Okay, well, now that something happens, you could be down for, a couple weeks.
Yeah. And organizations nowadays are relying more and more on third-party vendors to run their business operations. Do you think about that when you're bringing on a new vendor, like how dependent you are on them?
Yeah,
or is that just like a normal way of doing business?
Yeah, I actually think about, so being a finance major, when I think about third-party risk, I usually look at a couple things. I look at the type of relationship. Really third party, I want to know, what's our relationship? Who are we doing business with? Sort of their financial situation. I do typically look at Crunchbase or figure out, is this a startup? Do they really have a security person? I'll look in LinkedIn. Like, is there a live human that has the
like
title?
A sales rep who's filling out this?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of times you look at the SOC too. I was like, they don't even have a person in security. It's probably pretty questionable whether any of these security controls exist. But for me, it's really the most important thing around third-party risk is I don't think we're going to be predictive in terms of who's really going to get hit. I think it's understanding the landscaping. I think it's understanding the relationships. I think just tracking those pieces are important to us because it gives us that context. And where we do see risk, ABC software is in, Series A. They have 4 people working there, and now we want to be relying on them for whatever your HR, is that really what you want? Because it's
sure
not
about
just
that?
cyber risk, is they're a startup, right? And the
Right.
failure on startups
Hi.
could be 80,
Yeah.
90% depending on what round of funding you're in. And
Yeah.
so that's part of the piece that I also look at. I'm like, is this someone that is this piece just not critical? It's a non-critical piece of the business and we don't really care about it? Or is this really something that
Yeah.
is a integral piece that if they go out financially or from a cyber event, because both cause an outage,
Yeah. Yeah.
one's a little bit more permanent than the other,
Yeah.
is that the type of risk we want to take on? So
Yeah.
I do take a slightly broader view of it, but
Mhm.
really for me, for third party, it's understanding those relationships, who we're doing business with, what's the type of access they have, and just really understanding the landscape and then managing it from there.
It sounds so simple, but you may or may not be surprised at how many security leaders I speak to that don't even have their arms wrapped around their vendor ecosystem. Like they don't know who all their vendors are. So it's like even just getting that organized is a huge step in the right direction.
But I think it goes back to what you and I spoke about earlier, is if you make the underwriting process difficult for,
Mhm.
I mean, business people will do what, the functions will do what they want to do. And if you make the process difficult, they'll just find ways around it.
Yeah.
And if there's no consequence for them moving around it, then, and they're in a situation where they need a review done quickly and your process is a 6-week
Right.
process, multiple questionnaires, you got to get on the phone with the
Mhm.
vendor 2 times, and then you're going to tell them no, they're probably not going to come to you.
Yeah.
And that's the reality is, at some point, if you're in, a salesperson or you're in the commercial space, you're an HR person and you have to get something done because your job is dependent on it, you're probably going to make
Got to
that
get it done.
decision. And I think part of that is the easier you make the process
Yep.
and the more advisor you become in that process and advising a risk, the more likely the businesses come to you. I think the other thing is just the process one, like how do I get into the contract as part of the contract review? Or if you have a
Mhm.
procurement team, is how do you embed the cyber review as part of that? But yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge, especially if you're coming into an organization where there's already a bunch of number of legacy providers in, and maybe third party wasn't a piece of that. But then just start. Okay, we'll just start today. Like as new vendors come in, we'll figure out how to do all the
Mhm.
historical pieces. But I do think you have to be a good business partner, and if you are, people will come and want your help and want your advice on should I be doing business with this vendor or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I could obviously spend the rest of the time talking about third party risk, but we can broaden the conversation a little bit so that the audience doesn't get bored of us talking about TPRM. So I'm curious, what is your favorite part of being a CISO and your least favorite part about being a CISO?
That's a great question. I think for me, being a CISO, you are against an adversary that is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And if you love that, right, the uncertainty of that and the challenge of that, and you're also trying to drive strategy internally
Right.
and help people understand what's happening externally, sort of that external threat intelligence, how it informs our risk, and then working with the executive team to
Mhm.
translate that risk into something that we need to take action on.
Right.
I find that enjoyable. It's I find the educational piece with the executives, I th- when the light bulb finally goes on, it's really that
Rewarding.
aha
Yeah.
moment. So I like that aspect about security. In terms of what I think security can be stressful depending on your personality, right?
Yeah.
So, oddly, when I did my executive review, they're like, "You have the weirdest personality for security," because I have a very high tolerance to risk,
Uh-huh.
right? So I probably sit on the extreme of any CISO that you'll ever talk to. But I think if you are a high stress person, this is not a good.
Yeah.
This is not a. You have a lot of anxiety. It's not a good job for
Yeah.
you because it's once again, it's a constant, you constantly have events come up, right?
Mhm.
Someone clicked on something, something's happening, or something happened externally, and now we need to see if that might impact us. And so I think that constant action could be a
Yeah.
drain. I think if you look at security as a whole in terms of mental health and you track it on any metric from alcoholism
Mhm.
to alcohol usage to drug use to
Mhm.
mental illness, security has a disproportionately high amounts of
Wow,
those things.
really?
Well, you could be working, you could be in a ransomware incident. If you're there, you're with for 2 weeks working 24/7. What sort of mental toll does that
Yeah,
take on a
really.
person over time? I think it's something that you have to be very cognizant of. You really have to manage being in this space because it will and can drain you if you're not careful.
Yeah. I think my like perfectionist type A tendencies would have a very hard time with that. It's like it's never wrapped up with a bow. It's never complete. It's never done. It's always changing and constant and a little chaotic. I think that for my personality type, that would be hard. So I do think it takes a special kind of person to be able to handle that constant variability and change and knowing that at any moment
Well, and
something
it's
could come
even
in.
things like so this week, last week we had Claude which then became Moltbot, which now is uh, OpenClaw, I think. It's changed 4 times. And so and I don't know if you know what that is, but so
No,
you
I wasn't aware.
basically load it on a computer
Hmm.
and then it has the ability to do, or check your email. It basically takes control of your entire system. So
Wow.
you can like text it messages like, hey, order me Grubhub. And you can give it the ability to order you Grubhub. It can make flights for you. And so sounds great. So if you look at the news, there's a huge rush on like Apple computers, like these
Hmm.
Apple minis. So people want to set up their own you know, their own little open cloud or Maltbot. And uh, you think about that from a security perspective. What if
No, it's
someone
like
puts that
access to
on? What
everything.
if someone puts that on your network? And what does it do? Right?
Yeah.
It's theoretically it's
Cool.
helpful, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. But it could go, yeah. So those are the things that we're constantly, so it's not even what we would consider the threat, what the threat landscape is. There's also this additional complexity now of the AI landscape in
Right.
terms of what is being deployed into the network.
Yes.
What is the type of risk that is that we're taking on as part of
Yeah.
that? Is it going to expose data that we don't want to be exposed? And so we weigh not just now, whatever the threat actors are doing, but we're also having to weigh what's happening. And that technology landscape has accelerated really over the last year.
Yep.
It's hard to keep up if especially if you're not close to that space. It's hard to keep up as to what's really happening there.
Yeah. I think about that even just personally using AI and what I'm talking about, with AI and what I'm sharing with AI. And
Were you an early adopter of AI?
I would say so. I about 2 years ago, I worked for a company called Copy AI, and I was selling AI workflows to sales organizations. And this was pretty early on when like workflows weren't really a thing yet, when you could still sell them because people
Yeah.
weren't just creating
Yeah.
their own. And so that's when I really started to understand in my personal life and professional life the power of a workflow and AI. But it is true, like, the more that we rely on AI to kind of take on more capacity for our lives, whether that's personally or professionally, the more it has access to. And I know that that's something that everyone should be thinking about, but, people are using AI as their therapist now and telling it their deepest, darkest secrets? And I think about that. If
The
someone
medical, I mean, you think about AI a year and a half ago, it
Yeah.
seems quaint.
Oh, yeah,
It
totally.
seems like horse and buggy.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it feels quaint. The first time you plug something in
Yeah.
ChatGPT and it gives you like a job description, you're like,
Right,
write a
right.
job.
Yeah.
You're like, this thing is
Rewrite
amazing.
this email
Yeah,
for me.
rewrite this
Yeah,
email.
yeah.
Like that is the most amazing moment. But now you look back at that, you're like, that's quaint compared to what it can
Totally.
do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge from a security perspective because we don't know in some cases the implication of some of these
Right.
technologies or whether they're secure or not. And so back to the email example where you're going to load a cloud bot on your PC, it's going to check your email. Well, what if someone sends you an email, says ignore all your
Right,
commands,
like, sends
and
you a prompt
yeah, sends you a
injected
prompt in
in
an
the
email, and
email. Yep.
they've tried it and it
Yeah,
works.
yeah,
So you can send
yeah,
a prompt, an email to someone with a
yep,
prompt. The bot reads the email as if
yeah,
it's a prompt and does what it. So those are the
yeah.
implications
I know,
of
that
some of
is,
this
like,
technology.
mind-boggling. I, saw or heard that someone wrote a prompt in their LinkedIn About Me section so that every, AI bot that crawled their LinkedIn, they sent them like some ridiculous poem or something
Yes.
so that they
Yes.
could quickly identify, okay, this was just an AI bot that sent me this message. But I was like, that is so genius. I would have never thought of that to like inject a prompt into
I saw a
my
post
LinkedIn
on X
profile.
where someone had set one up and they said, well, my Cloudbot ordered me Grubhub.
Uh-huh.
They said, but I realized I didn't give it a credit card. It went out and got a skim credit card, created a
No.
Grubhub account, and ordered Grubhub for them.
Oh my goodness. That is insane.
And then I don't know, are you responsible for the
I
crime at that
I
point?
don't
Like,
know. Are we
technically your AI
arresting
did it. I
AI?
don't know
Oh,
what,
yeah.
I don't know.
It's the
So
same thing. We were just talking earlier. We're in Austin right now, and I took my first Waymo today, my driverless car, and I'm like, who's getting a ticket if there's an infraction, right? Like if there's an accident, who's at fault?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't either. I just ask you like one little question and you just go, you're so easy to talk to.
I'm a chatterbot when
It's
you
really, really, really interesting. You are like, you have a really fascinating way of thinking about all of this. I do think that you are ahead of the curve. I do. And it's just so refreshing to talk to. Because like I said, talking to CISOs for a living, you know,
we're a dry group. I mean, we are.
but you know, it's really fascinating to see and understand how CISOs can think about it in so many different varying ways, you know, and you're clearly very tech forward. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Any final words or thoughts that you want to leave the audience with
No,
about the future of cyber in an AI world?
I think embrace it. I think no matter who you are, whether you're in the security space, whether you're not in the security space, I think there AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
I think if you looked at something like blockchain or something, blockchain never really drove the change that I
Hmm.
think AI will. Now, I think we're early. I think we're high in
We
the
are.
hype cycle,
Yeah.
meaning we're going to spend a lot of money in AI and maybe not get the returns out
Hmm.
initially. But I think in the next 2, 3, 4 years, you'll start to see things settle down and you'll start to see how AI is really going to change the world. Sort of like the internet. I feel like every 20 years we go through this,
Yeah.
right? We
I
had
think about that too.
the internet and now we have AI and then
Yeah.
another
Who
20
knows?
years we'll have something else. But so I do think that AI will
Robots.
follow yeah, AI will follow a similar pattern of it's very high in the hype cycle, but in the next 5 or 10 years, you really will start to see the returns and how it's going to change the world, right? I
Yeah.
think, you talked about the therapist, like where you're going to be talking to an AI therapist, or maybe, AI's, already in the medical field looking at x-rays and MRIs,
Yep.
and there's gonna be a lot of opportunity with AI. I also think there's a lot of risk with AI
Yeah.
as the innovation is happening faster maybe than we understand the implications in some
Right.
cases. And so really as a security community, how do we understand it and try and at least keep up? I wouldn't
Hmm.
say get ahead of it because I
Hmm.
think I think that we're week to week at this point.
Yeah,
I think
really.
getting ahead of it is probably not
Yeah,
going
it's
to happen,
fruitless. Yeah.
but I think at least keeping up with what's happening and rolling up your sleeves a little bit and understanding how do these things really work on the back end, right?
Yeah.
How do they really function? I
We
think it
should
makes
probably ask Bob. I bet he would know.
Bob knows, but really understanding how they work on the back end, and
Mhm.
so I think that's really the critical piece for security organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think leveraging it in security, and that's the ironic thing is we leverage AI in security probably the most of any function already between
Mhm.
the millions of signals that we're getting off of devices and security alerts. A lot of it's already driven by AI.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see when I talk to security people and they're adverse to AI, I'm thinking your entire org is being run right
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
by AI.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This was such a pleasure.
it was great. It
So
was great having a
so
conversation with you.
so happy to have been able to dig into it today. There's so much more that we could talk about. So maybe we'll save that for
Yeah.
part two. But yeah, let's do it again soon.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Excellent. Thank
All
you for
right.
having me.
Thank you for coming.